Scary bedtime stories. Red signal. I work as an assistant driver in the open spaces of the Russian railway network. We work in pairs, the driver himself and his faithful assistant. Once my partner fell ill, and I was sent on a flight with another engineer. We met before the trip, chatted, so I asked, "Where is your assistant?" I didn't pass the medical examination. My hands were shaking, he answered me. Well, they shook and shook, which does not happen in life. On this topic, they hushed it up. Let's go, let's make friends, you can. There were plenty of topics for conversation. He, like me, went to the gym and ended up with a muscular uncle. So we chatted with him all the way in one direction. We rested in nature and went back. The train was loaded with explosives, so a guard came with us. For the movement of a dangerous infection, there is a branch remote from the general path, passing through fields and forests. That's where they took us. It was late at night. We are driving, chatting, and incomprehensible rustles and whispers are heard on the radio. Well, I picked up the phone to listen, to bring the speaker closer to my ear, when suddenly the engineer changed his face and almost shouted order to hang up. In bewilderment, I put it aside, asking what was the reason for such a violent reaction. And he said, "Remember when I told you that my assistant's hands were shaking? So it was the same." Rustles, whispers in the radio. He also took to listen to who says what, just like you are now. They told him something, as he himself says, some kind of grandmother, and his hands shook the next day. I don't know if that's why, but what the hell is not to joke? The desire to listen to the radio immediately disappeared. I began to ask questions on this topic, and he said that there was a village on the hill where my grandmother lives, and her grandfather left the radio equipment. Many times they complained about her that she wedges in the air, interferes with work. They even conducted an investigation and found her, but for some reason, even after the investigation, she continued to transmit her messages. No action was taken. A little later, we stood in front of a red signal, and on the railway it's not at all like on the road by cars. Red can burn at least 3, even all 10 hours in a row. The topic of the grandmother was forgotten. Jokes and all sorts of other chatter rushed. After some time, a guard with eyes like 2 saucers came running from the back cabin, with the words, "There is a woman coming to us in a nightgown and barefoot." I repeat that it is deep night outside, the season is late autumn, there is snow on the street, the degree is below 0. Remembering the ill-fated grandmother, we ran to close the doors of the locomotive. Back in the cockpit, they turned off the lights and quieted down. I was afraid to lean out the window. I only heard how at first someone wandered around the locomotive, and then began to knock on the body with pitiful pleas for help. The engineer leaned out to see who was there. You never know. Maybe what kind of help is really needed, but immediately closed the window and walked away. Meanwhile, on the street, this same grandmother began to run and laugh out loud. To say that we were scared is to say nothing. 3 healthy men sat and were afraid, like small children. Luckily for us, the yellow light came on and off we went. After arriving, we told other locomotive crews about this, to which we were told that this was not an isolated case, but that she had not come up before, but sat nearby and watched, from time to time shouting something. Here is such a story. What it really was, I don't know. Maybe just a sick woman, or maybe some kind of witch. Apartment horrors. We lived in a hostel then. My parents and my brother and I. We lived together and had fun. 2 modest rooms, well, I didn't have to choose, and they were happy about it. My brother and I slept in a separate room on a bunk bed. As the eldest, I slept on the second floor. Well, sometimes we changed places for interest. Everything was fine, but we only had a guest. I fall asleep for a very long time. I can spin for hours and only fall asleep after 11. Parents constantly scolded, because in the morning it is impossible to wake up to school. Our floors were creaky, especially in the corridor. Any slightest movement was voiced by the creaky floor. For many years everything was quiet and peaceful, and then it started. As soon as the whole family went to bed, my brother usually passed out as soon as his head touched the pillow. There was a creaking of the floor from slow steps in the corridor and, of course, these steps were heading to the nursery. A curtain separated the corridor from our room, but she never moved when those footsteps approached us. You lie and listen, creak, creak, creak. It's getting closer, and it stops at the headboard and silence. What's it? My heart starts pounding loudly and furiously, as if it wants to break out of my chest. My temples throb wildly. My body becomes cold and wet. It's scary to move, and even more so to turn around to look. I want to open up, but not. A blanket is at least some kind of protection. My body is already numb, but I still endure and do not move. The entity is standing nearby and that's it. I do not know if he is tall or small. If he is tall, then he looks at me point blank, and if he is small, then his brother is out of luck. Although he doesn't care, he's sleeping. I was in such a state of shock for 10 minutes and I don't remember falling asleep. In the morning I told my parents. They say they also heard a creaking in the hallway. This happened again in about a day or two. The main thing is to fall asleep before my parents went to bed, and I rarely did it, so I snatched shock therapy. Sometimes my brother and I heard these steps together, but we were scared silent and fell asleep in horror, and in the morning we shared.